What's happening? Happy hump day to you and yours. Thanks for joining me as always. It is much appreciated. Let's get started with the deals that have actually gotten done for the Patriots since the last time we spoke yesterday morning. We'll start at tight end, okay? Austin Hooper signs a one-year deal up to $3 million. I like it. I like the deal with Hooper, and I'll tell you why. Number one, he is an upgrade from Pharaoh Brown. And I appreciate Pharaoh Brown. I thought Brown did a very, very good job considering what he was asked to do, right? I thought it was a good fit. I would have been fine with Pharaoh Brown being the second tight end on this team for 2024. But I do think that Austin Hooper is an upgrade over Brown. He's also a very, very good fit with Alex Van Pelt. He has played within an Alex Van Pelt offense, so he totally understands the scheme, understands the system. I think he's a very good fit. We keep talking about guys who have yak ability, have a little bit of wiggle to him. And Hooper, even though he's not the same guy that he was, 3-4 years ago, he still has plenty of wiggle. He still has plenty of yak ability. He's somebody who can catch a football, 2 yards, 3 yards on a check down and take it 15 to 20. And that is very important for this offense. Now, I would have liked Gerald Everett more, and I wish that was the move. But I also understand that Everett went to Chicago to work with Shane Waldron, who is an offensive coordinator that he has history with. And as we always talk about, relationships matter in this game. So I understand why Everett went to Chicago. I'm not even sure if the Patriots were interested in Everett. But if they were, you understand why he went to the Bears, given the relationship between he and Shane Waldron. So Hooper, I think, is a very logical fit as tight end 2, makes a ton of sense, has history with Van Pelt, works for me. The second deal I want to talk about, and I absolutely freaking love this one. Josh Uche, 1 year, $3 million. I love this deal. Crazy value. And I don't talk about value saying that you just got this guy on the cheap and he was a scrap heap player and you'll get more from him than others would. That's not the case with Uche. Uche, I do believe, is a very talented pass rusher. I think he will help this team. And a 1 year, $3 million deal is laughable. Reportedly, he was offered $11 million guaranteed over 2 years from another team. So, you've got this idea that you get somebody for $3 million that could have walked for $11 million guaranteed. That tells you that he is a much, much better player than he's going to get paid to be. And that's a good thing for the Patriots. The more players, the more good players that you have, especially at reasonable prices, means you can continue to build this thing the right way. So I love the crazy value in this Uche deal. 1 year, $3 million, sign me up. He helps the pass rush. And I think what you'll see is what we've seen from Uche in the past. I think you'll see Uche be a third down sub pass rusher. That's going to be his role. I think he understands that. He will embrace it, and he will help this team get to the quarterback. So I think you'll see him again being that pass rush guy on third down. The other thing about Uche, just off the fact that he's going to make $3 million instead of the $11 million guaranteed that he was offered. Yes, he's betting on himself. And financially, in the long term, this might work out best for him. But he's not taking the guaranteed money in the pocket right now because he wants to be here in New England. And it's much like Hunter Henry. It's much like Kendrick Bourne. These guys that want to be here. I'm opening the door to good players that want to stay. Uche is a good player for what he does. He's very good in his role, and he wants to stay here with the Patriots. So if you want to stay here, we welcome you, especially if you're a good football player. And I also like this idea because it allows the Patriots to develop Keon White. I mean, did I want Danielle Hunter? I would have loved Danielle Hunter. And maybe we'll talk about him later in the week. I would have loved Danielle Hunter. But he got $48 million guaranteed from Houston. And he's from Katy, Texas, which is 45 minutes away from Houston. So we went back home, and he's going to make $48 million guaranteed. The silver lining to not bringing in somebody like a Danielle Hunter is that you now have the ability to develop and grow Keon White. And now White can be the guy who can play on some early downs, give Judon a rest, and give Josh Uche an opportunity to play on third downs in his sub-pass role while you develop the young guy in White. So the idea of developing Keon White is going to be crucial to this program and the long-term success of this defense. I'll continue with thoughts on the Patriots signings in the last 24 hours, including the latest one that we found out about this morning. But first, I want to tell you about First Class Glazing. Nick Cattle Show is brought to you by First Class Glazing. If you need bathroom renovations or your bathtub glazed, check out First Class Glazing. Expert craftsmen, top-tier results, premium materials, precise techniques, the bathroom space that you and your significant other have always wanted. You can have it thanks to First Class Glazing. Visit them, firstclassglazing.com, or you can give my guy Jose a call at 617-849-0513, 617-849-0513. Mention this podcast to First Class Glazing, and you will get a free estimate plus 10% off. All right, let's talk about Anthony Jennings now. Another deal that I really like. I really like the idea of Jennings returning. He was on my list of guys that I wanted back. 3 years, $12 million. Fair value. Very fair deal. And I like bringing Jennings back because he was fantastic against the run last year. He was somebody who would just completely shut down the edge. He had a number of tackles for loss. He made a bunch of impact plays. Just a bunch of impact plays. So you're great versus the run. You solidify the edge. And when we think long-term, the idea of what your edge is going to look like defensively for the next 2-3 years. Judon's on the final year of his contract. Uche just signed a 1-year deal. So you have two young buildable pieces on the edge. You've got Jennings for 3 years, and you've got Keon White. Now, I'm not ruling out going out and finding somebody who could also play edge that would be more of a veteran presence. I wouldn't rule that out. Depth is always a good thing. But right now, this is kind of long-term security for the edge position because you develop Keon White the right way, and you have Jennings. Well, now if you do lose Uche next year, and if you lose Judon after this year, you have two in-house guys that you have developed, that you trust, that can play that position. So makes sense to me to bring Jennings back. I thought he popped last year. I did not expect Anthony Jennings to play as well as he played a season ago. There's no way. If you told me that Jennings would look as good as he did last year after hardly playing the first few years of his career, I would have called you crazy. But he stepped up. He played some great football, and I'm glad that he's back. I'm going to give you two 30,000-foot views, okay? Because I just broke down all of these deals that were done in the last 24 hours and told you why I like them. But let me give you the 30,000 view look, okay? 30,000-foot view. Retaining good players is a good thing. I know that might be a crazy idea, but retaining good players is good business sense. And so people keep falling into these traps. And I see this stuff on social media, and I try my hardest to ignore it. Trust me, I try and I try and I try. But there are a lot of people saying, oh, so the team that stunk and didn't have any talent, now you're just bringing everybody back. That's such a straw man. Because first of all, they're not bringing everybody back. They're not bringing Devontae Parker back. They're not bringing Mac Jones back. They're not bringing Chris Board back. They're not bringing Pharaoh Brown back. They're not bringing back several guys. There are going to be a number of guys that were on the roster last year that will not be on the football team in 2024. So can we stop with that? They're bringing everybody back. They're not bringing everybody back. So stop with that. If you keep throwing that out there, I'm sorry. It's just lazy analysis. Okay. Number two, they're bringing back their good players. Who have they brought back that you have a major issue with? Somebody could say Jalen Reagor. He signed a 1-year veteran minimum deal. Reagor could easily be on the practice squad the entire season. So let's not get over dramatic and throw Jalen Reagor's name out there. He's a guy who could push Tyquan Thornton for a roster spot. He's somebody who could help you on special teams a couple of weeks during the year. He's going to be sitting on the practice squad. We're not going to be talking about Jalen Reagor during the regular season. If we're talking about Reagor during the regular season, it's either terrible news because 3 or 4 of your receivers got hurt, or it's great news because Reagor deserves to be talked about. I mean, we're talking about $1 million for Jalen Reagor. It's a vet minimum deal. It's not going to impact your cap. So stop with the reaching. And just because the team won 4 games last year doesn't mean the entire team sucked. This defense was top 10 in DVOA. So I don't know, bringing back some of the guys on that side of the football that produced and helped you be a top 10 defense while the offense was a bleep show is a pretty good idea to me. Nobody was complaining about the defense. Like, this is the stuff that drives me crazy. And this is why you got to give the thumbs up while you're watching to the Nick Cattle Show. I understand that people sometimes, they get bored with nuance. They don't like contextual conversations, right? But we try our best here, and we don't always hit home runs. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. No problem standing at the front of the line telling you when I'm wrong. But we've got to have genuine conversations. Nobody was complaining about this defense when the year ended. The idea about a bad roster was offensively. It was always offensively. This roster offensively is embarrassing. Defensively, they're fine. Doesn't mean they're perfect, but nobody was complaining about the defense. I'm sorry. Nobody was screaming from the mountaintops that this defense wasn't good enough and you need to add 3 or 4 guys to this defense. The arguments about this team, okay, and the reason why this team was 4-13 was because offensively they were awful. They spent too many roster spots on special teams. Their special teams sucked. And their defense tried to hold it together. So I don't have an issue bringing back Josh Uche for 1 year, $3 million to be a sub-pass rusher because he's been really good at it for the most part, especially in 2022. I don't have an issue bringing back Anthony Jennings because he popped last year and he's a young guy. I don't have a problem bringing back defensive players that helped make this defense a top 10 defense. Now, I will have an issue, and we'll get to this in a little bit. I will have an issue if they fail to address their offensive needs. But it's so disingenuous to throw out there, oh, well, the team was 4-13, so just bring everybody back. Just bring everybody back. Taki is likely an upgrade over Mac Wilson, especially in coverage. So I'm a little frustrated by people always going back to the same old, same old. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. Makes no sense to me. Just because you won 4 games doesn't mean that all 53 guys was a waste. There have been a lot of good players. There have been even very good players. There have been stars. Calvin Johnson was on Detroit forever. Dude was one of the best receivers we've ever seen, that I have ever watched, and his team consistently sucked. So if you took that team over in Detroit during Calvin Johnson's prime and you kept Calvin Johnson on the team, would you be saying, oh, why would you keep Calvin Johnson? This team stunk last year. You don't burn down the whole team. You're not going to release everybody. Did people expect Elliot Wolf and Gerard Mayo to walk into the office and say, we're releasing all 53 players and starting from scratch? Like, it hurts my head. All right, don't forget to give us that thumbs up. More likes means more eyeballs. Best week so far in this podcast existence. It's because of you. So don't forget to give us that like on YouTube. Don't forget to give us the like on Facebook, Twitter/X. We're about 70 people away from hitting our subscriber goal. We want to hit 2,500 subscribers by April 1st. We should get there. Hopefully we get there by the end of the week. We get there because of your help. So don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe. And if you're listening to the on-demand version of this on Spotify, Apple Pods, or even also on YouTube, you can like it then. And you can also rate and review. All of those things help out this show as we try to build this community. I just gave you a solid 3 to 4 minutes on how we are the alternative to what a lot of stuff is being said in the Boston sports talk realm. This is why we are different. This is why. So give us that like, comment, subscribe. Also, Patreon, patreon.com/Nick Cattles, Cattles. You have the Patreon channel launched. We will be doing an ad-free video on demand podcast tonight at the Patreon. $5 a month, $1.25 a week. As I say, exchange one of the pints that you're going to have this month for the Patreon. Exchange a pint for a Patreon. $5 a month. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles, Cattles. We will have that podcast ad-free tonight on demand. Also, we do a mailbag every Friday. We'll be hanging out with everybody twice a month as well for a live hangout / Q&A chat, which will be a lot of fun. $1.25 a week, $5 a month. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles. All right, let's get to the next topic at hand. But before we do that, let's grab a super chat from Brian Moniz. In my opinion, Wolf hasn't made a move yet that's a real head scratcher. Sorry if that offends anyone. I tend to agree. Now, there's a difference between saying, I would rather have Gerald Everett than Austin Hooper, and saying that Austin Hooper's a bad move. It doesn't mean Austin Hooper's a bad move. I would have liked the Everett move better. But again, Everett going to Chicago, we have to understand that Everett has a say in his free agency. We cannot act like the Patriots have the final say. That's not how it works. There's a reason why the first word is free. The person is free to make any decision they want to make. And it's funny because when we look at Josh Uche, he's the perfect example, isn't he? Uche was offered $11 million guaranteed, but he decided to stay here in New England. Why? Well, he wants to really work on a prove-it deal. I'm sure in long term, he thinks he might be able to make more money by doing it, but it's because he knows Gerard Mayo. He knows DeMarcus Covington. He was drafted by the Patriots. He has been developed by this program. And he trusts the coaching staff. And he's comfortable in New England. I don't know his family situation, but if he's got family, I'm sure his family is comfortable here. That's how it works. He has a connection. These free agents, they have their own decisions to make. And there are a lot of things that go into it. And not every single free agent just takes the quote-unquote most money. So we have to remember that. You have to appreciate the process and this idea that these players, they're making decisions that are best for them. You can offer a boatload of money. Somebody might take a little bit less to stay where they are because they're just comfortable there. Mike Evans decided to stay in Tampa. You see the story that came out over the weekend? Why did Evans stay in Tampa? Evans wanted to test free agency. The Patriots reportedly were ready to dump a bunch of money on Mike Evans's lap. Evans stayed in Tampa. Why? He stayed in Tampa because his wife told him that she wanted to stay in Tampa. These are real people. Even though they make a lot more money than we do. Families matter. Wives matter. Girlfriends matter. Kids matter. Weather matters. So it's not just a unilateral decision that the Patriots can make. We can sit there and come up with a list of these names and say, I want that guy, I want that. But it's not that easy. Every decision is different. Now, the vast majority will go for the most money. But there are situations that change that. So I just, when I look at Elliot Wolf and what he's done so far, to get back to Brian's super chat. And again, if you want to jump to the front of the line, there's a lot of people talking, a lot of people commenting, dropping questions. If you want your question or comment brought up on the screen and want me to talk about it, you send a super chat. That's how you do it, like Brian did. I don't really have a beef with anything that Elliot Wolf has done. I don't. I'm fine with Hunter Henry. I mean, we don't have to go through every deal. Like, I don't think we have to go through every one. But I think right now, so far what's been done, I don't have an issue. And by the way, another thing I just want to hit on quickly. Like, I know some people were getting all worked up about Kendrick Bourne. I loved bringing Kendrick Bourne back. Some people said, oh, the contract. Don't get fooled by the silly money. Don't get fooled by the agent leaks. And I'll give you an example. Andrew Callahan just 2 minutes ago tweeted out what Kendrick Bourne's guaranteed money is. Do you know how much Kendrick Bourne is making guaranteed? Throw it into the comment section. I want guesses. How much do you think? How much do you think Kendrick Bourne, and Mike N, I just saw your chat. Don't ruin it for everybody. How much guaranteed money do you think Kendrick Bourne is getting in his contract with the Patriots? I'll give you a couple of seconds. Rob D says $15 million. Cody Haley says $6.5 million. I want more guesses because I'm going to make a point here. I'm going to make a point as to why people get all wrapped up in narratives. Keith Kramer says $10 million. S27 says $20 million over 3 years. Cool Genuine Phil guesses $4 million. Tony Stark says $6 million. Mark Feldman says $7 million. All right. Justin TF Patriot, $8.5 million. I'm going to stop you there. King says 12, maybe. Andrew Callahan just posted. Kendrick Bourne, his total guarantees in the new deal, $5.5 million. And people were freaking out. $5.5 million. That's all he got guaranteed. That's all he got. It's not even the $8 million guaranteed that people thought it was yesterday. Kendrick Bourne is getting $5.5 million guaranteed. That's a great freaking deal. So try to, and I know it's difficult with social media and people screaming at you and screaming about things. Try to keep things in perspective. That's what I try to do. And yeah, I get worked up. Of course I do. But people were going nuts about the Bourne contract. And at the end of the day, guys making $5.5 million guaranteed. All right, let's get to Calvin Ridley. Again, thanks for joining me. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Every single thumb matters. That's how we beat the algorithm, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Give us that thumbs up if you like what we do. Don't forget to comment and subscribe. Trying to hit 2,500 subscriptions. 2,500 subscriptions by April 1st. We're about 70 away. We can do it with your help. Also, rate and review to the podcast and Patreon. Check out the details. Patreon.com. Nick Cattle, CATTLES, $5 a month. $5 a month, $1.25 a week. Exclusive content for you. Does not impact this podcast. All right, let's get to Calvin Ridley because it feels like we've been on Ridley Watch for roughly 5 years now. And I will tell you, I am fatigued by Calvin Ridley Watch. He's still unsigned, if you're wondering. I got a kick out of Adam Schefter's tweet yesterday about how Ridley currently wants to stay in Jacksonville. Does that mean that Ridley can change his mind in 5 minutes? Currently. He's currently leaning towards wanting to stay. Okay. Josina Anderson tweeted out last night that the Patriots have decided to keep their offer on the table. So that's what we know. I am 95% sure. 95% sure, and I've been wrong before, and I hope I'm wrong now. 95% sure that Ridley stays in Jacksonville. We have discussed the compensation on this show. If you have missed prior podcasts, I have mentioned that, Ridley, it's a very specific situation because if he signed with Jacksonville, Jacksonville would have to give up a second-round pick to Atlanta. If he didn't sign with Jacksonville, Jacksonville would have to give up a third-round pick. I had shared that with you multiple times. I don't know how many people realize that. But I did miss one thing, and this is on me. I missed one particular aspect of that deal. And that particular aspect of the deal was that timing matters. So today at 4:01, if Ridley signs with Jacksonville, Jacksonville only has to give up a third-round pick. So I believe that's what's happening here. I believe that Ridley is waiting and waiting and waiting. I believe that Ridley is just trying to drive up his own price. He's trying to get Jacksonville to pay more money. He's trying to get the Patriots to put more money on the table so he can go back to Jacksonville for more money. I think that's what he's doing. I think he's trying to squeeze as much money out of Jacksonville that he can before 401 today. So 95%, I believe he's staying. And by the way, how far do you extend? Even if you want Ridley, like I want Ridley, do you want Ridley at Michael Pittman money? And I know some people say, look, it's your own philosophy. Some people say just throw all the money in the world at him because you got a ton of money to spend. I'm not paying Calvin Ridley $25 million a year. Sorry. Because what people miss during that conversation is if you pay Calvin Ridley $25 million a year, which is a drastic overpay, everybody else in the locker room is paying attention. Every deal affects every next deal. That's why if you're a good general manager, you don't make deals in vacuums. So what's the limit? And I also believe the Patriots have a very good offer on the table to Calvin Ridley because we've heard that the Patriots have made wide receiver their number one priority. Multiple reports have said that the Patriots have been aggressive. So I know that some people want to try to paint this as, oh, well, they won't step up. They won't step up. They won't step up. They won't pay the money. There's absolutely zero reporting and zero evidence that the Patriots have not taken Calvin Ridley and the pursuit of Ridley seriously. Every report that I have read has said that they have put a great offer on the table. So all of that is just screaming into the wind. Super chat. Justin TF says Ridley using New England for leverage. I agree with you. I think he's just trying to get the best money from Jacksonville. I think that's what we're doing here. And look, I'll have a thought on Elliot Wolf not pulling the deal because I think that could tell us something. But Justin, I think you're right. I do think Ridley's using it for leverage. Mark Feldman. I don't know if that's the same Mark Feldman that I worked with at 98.5. If it is, hey, Mark, hope you're doing well. $5 super chat from Mark Feldman. I always appreciate that. Can't say enough about the super chats. That's how you jump to the front of the line with your comment and question. If you have a question or a comment, make sure you throw it in there along with the super chat donation. But always appreciate those donations. Mean the world to me. All right. Like, comment, subscribe. Patreon. You know the deal. Patreon.com/Nick Cattle, CATTLES. So here's the thing about Elliot Wolf not pulling his offer. That would tell me that Wolf doesn't necessarily believe that any of these wide receivers that are out there are worth him being aggressive with. We heard he wanted to be aggressive with Evans off the market. We heard he wanted to be aggressive with Michael Pittman off the market. We know he's been aggressive with Calvin Ridley. There was a report that they at least had conversations with Gabe Davis. But I don't think Wolf is looking at this wide receiver class and saying, I've got to go out there and get a guy. I think his guy is Ridley. And if Ridley doesn't take the deal, then I think Wolf believes he can pivot and go to Hollywood Brown if he has to. And these other receivers might be waiting for the Ridley market. These other receivers might be waiting for the Patriots. Because if Ridley does stay with Jacksonville, which is what I expect happening, then these other receivers could then possibly go to New England and get more money from them than anywhere else. So that could be a reason for the slow wide receiver market. But here's the thing. Here's what fascinates me. Not the Ridley stuff, because again, I think Ridley's playing them for leverage. What is fascinating today to me, what is Elliot Wolf's plan B? What is Elliot Wolf's pivot? And I just automatically think of the Friends GIF that people post. I saw Lazar do it last night. Pivot, pivot, pivot. I just think of, pivot, pivot. What is Wolf's pivot? Because we know that Wolf and the Patriots, it's been reported by several people. Wide receiver was a top priority. Some people have even reported that wide receiver was the number one priority for this front office. So what is the pivot? Evans, they couldn't get out of their hands. Pittman, they couldn't get out of their hands. Ridley turns down a big-time offer to stay in Jacksonville. It is what it is. So what is the pivot? We know they want a number one receiver. So what do? That's what's fascinating. That's the secret sauce for the next 24 to 48 hours. Not what happens with Ridley. I think many of us believe Ridley's gone. Ridley's going to stay in Florida. What's the pivot by Wolf? And how quick is that pivot? You know, I did the podcast with Greg Bedard yesterday. For those that watched the Greg Bedard Patriots podcast, I appreciate every single one of you. Recently, we were voted as the number one podcast on that survey that comes out. That's awesome. And I appreciate every one of you that might watch that podcast as well as this one. But Greg brought up a great point. Greg said the way the Mac Wilson thing was handled told him that Elliot Wolf had a plan and that they had a board. That board was stacked with their options. And they had Mac Wilson on the board. And they tried to get Mac Wilson done. But did you notice, as soon as Mac Wilson went to Arizona, what happened moments after? Sion Taki. And Greg's point was, as soon as the Patriots knew Mac Wilson was off the board, they took the name off and they went to their very next guy who was Taki. And boom, they got the deal done. So if that's how Elliot Wolf is handling business, at 4:01 today, Calvin Ridley, we find out that he's staying in Jacksonville. If that is the case, that's what I anticipate. If that's what happens, who's the next guy on the board? Do we see Wolf pivot? Do we see Wolf pivot immediately like he did from Mac Wilson to Taki? Does he pivot immediately and we find out who's the new wide receiver coming to New England? I'm not telling you it's a guarantee, but I would not be surprised if the Ridley news is broken at 4:01 like all of us expect it to. I would not be surprised by this evening we find out the Patriots have brought in a new wide receiver. And it'll be interesting, right? They're reportedly talking to the Chargers. Is it Mike Williams? Is it Keenan Allen? Is it Brandon Ayuk of the 49ers? Is it T. Higgins? And no, I'm not buying into this idea that Matthew Judon had a phone call with Higgins and he's going to be a Patriot. I'm not taking the bait. Judon's had way too many tweets the last 3 years. I'm not jumping into that. So what's the pivot? Is it Cortland Sutton, who's a very interesting guy in Denver? So what's the pivot? Who comes to town? I do think that Elliot Wolf is going to address wide receiver. And I think we will see it relatively soon after the Calvin Ridley decision is official. And that's why they've been laying the groundwork and talking to teams like the Chargers. Justin TF Patriot, Super Chat. Thank you, Justin. What would an Ayuk trade cost? I would think that the Niners would be asking for a first-round pick. Now, that's obviously not going to happen with the Patriots because they're picking third. It could cost you 34. And like we talked about with Higgins, the conversation is not if you like the player. I love Ayuk. I love Higgins. The question is, do you want to give up what it's going to take to bring those guys in when you're working on a rebuild? As much as you love those receivers, are you willing to give up a second-round pick? Are you willing to give up 34 and pay Ayuk at the top of the market to bring him in? Or do you look at guys that could be late first-round, early second-round picks and say to yourself, I actually believe that guy can be as good as Brandon Ayuk? Would you rather have A.D. Mitchell and spend the money elsewhere? That's going to be the question. I'm not against trading for a receiver. Tell me the compensation, right? Then I'll tell you whether I like the deal or don't like the deal. If you get Keenan Allen for a 5th-round pick, giddy up. I'm in. Mike Williams, for anything more than a 6th-round pick, I'm out. So tell me the compensation. If you've got to give up 2 or 3 picks for T. Higgins and pay him, I'm out. Not during this rebuild. Too much to invest. As much as I love Higgins and as much as you need a wide receiver one, for me, that's too much. Some might disagree. For Brandon Ayuk, if it's the 34th pick, I would seriously entertain that. But if it's multiple picks, that's when we might have an issue. Tell me what the other picks are. DF, Super Chat. If we don't get Ridley, then I think we should try to get Tyler Boyd and Hollywood Brown. I'm interested in Boyd, and I wonder about Boyd because, of course, as we know, he's been playing in Cincinnati. So how much, did Jamar Chase and T. Higgins impact his value? Could Tyler Boyd end up being much better than we think? I think he's good, but could he be even better? Some would say, well, he might not be as good as he was in Cincinnati because he had Higgins and Chase to take coverage. Works both ways. Snip, snap, snip, snap. Hollywood Brown. Depends on the price. I'm not bending over backwards for Hollywood Brown. Just not. Just wouldn't do that. All right, so let's talk about what needs to be done now. Okay? We went over who's been signed. We went over the Calvin Ridley situation. We talked about pivoting from Ridley if he decides to stay in Jacksonville like many of us expect him to do. Now the question is, what is next? What happens? Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. Trying to get to 2,500 subscribers by April 1st. Help us do that by clicking on the subscriber button. And you can get notifications too. So when we have a breaking news pod like Owenu the other night, you get notified. So don't forget to like and subscribe, rate and review. And if you love what we do here, you are going to love the Patreon page. Exclusive content not covered in this podcast. We'll not only talk about the Patriots, but if you're a Red Sox fan, if you're a Celtics fan, Bruins fan, we will talk about those sports as well. And I'll have an ad-free podcast tonight on that Patreon page. And we'll have an ad-free video on demand pod every week. $5 a month, $1.25 a week. You get a mailbag and you get to hang out twice a month and have some fun with a hangout and Q&A. All right. So what do the Patriots need to do? They need to address wide receiver. We just went through it. If it's not Calvin Ridley, pivot and give me somebody who's worth something. Give me Courtland Sutton. Give me Keenan Allen. Again, dependent on price. I think you can get Courtland Sutton for a reasonable price. I think you can get Keenan Allen, hopefully, if the Chargers realize that nobody wants Mike Williams for anything better than like a sixth. You might be able to squeeze Keenan Allen out of LA, even though I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Chargers do want to keep him. I think Herbert wants to keep him. Mike Williams, again, depends on the price. If it's a 6th-round pick or so, I would take a flyer. Maybe you can trade for Mike Williams using that 5th round, using that 6th round pick that you got from Minnesota for Mac Jones. It's an extra pick that you got, right? So wide receiver remains a massive need. They've got to get somebody. If they don't get somebody via free agency or trade, it's a massive fail by Elliot Wolf. You've got to get somebody. Offensive tackle. Not moving. I mean, not moving at all. You look at the tackle position, Tyron Smith is still out there. Jonah Williams is still out there. Mekhi Becton, still out there. So, one of these guys, go out and get them. Go out and get them. If they can land Smith, great. Jonah, great. Becton, I'll take it. Depending on price, because I think he's got a lot of talent. You've got to make sure that he takes care of his weight, and you've got to make sure that you connect with him and try to keep him healthy. But Becton's 24 years old and has a ton of talent. So they need to go out there and get an offensive tackle. We know that they want Tyron Smith. We know they're interested in Jonah Williams. Neither of those guys have signed yet. So they're still out there. I would love for the Patriots to get one of those two guys. I also would love them to get a free safety at some point. C.J. Gardner-Johnson obviously signed with the Eagles yesterday, 3 years, $33 million. Again, nobody other than Xavier McKinney has received the Kyle Duggar treatment. Duggar on the transition tag is at $13.8 million. Gardner-Johnson got the best deal aside from McKinney, and McKinney, if you're wondering, is way better than Duggar, with all due respect. McKinney got $17 million a year. Gardner-Johnson got $11. Everybody else, they haven't been able to crack $8 million a year. So there are still names out there. Free safety, I would love to see them get a free safety. Cornerback, preferably outside corner. That is still a need. In my eyes, I think you need somebody opposite of Christian Gonzalez so you can move Jonathan Jones to either free safety or into the slot. So I'm looking at cornerback, and I'm also looking at a solid defensive line depth signing. Defensive line depth. There was the, Rankins report yesterday from Mass Live, so maybe that's a guy. So the 5 top needs to me: wide receiver, tackle, free safety, cornerback, defensive line. I want to see the Patriots, as soon as those markets start to move, I want to see them address it. Super chat, Daigo Arts, FX. If the Pats aren't in love with one of the top 3 quarterbacks, then they need to take the best available player, which is Marvin Harrison. Our wide receiver 1 is set for at least a decade. I disagree with that. I understand people that feel that way. The argument's an easy one, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. could be, and some would say definitely is, the best player available in this draft. And so you just draft the best player available, and then you figure it out. If you don't love the quarterback, then you draft that guy. I would rather move down. Now, I'm not moving down beyond like 7 or 8 or 9, right? I want to stay within a shot of Roma Dunze or Malik Neighbors or Alt or Fashanu or one of those tackles, right? I don't want to move too far down. But if I don't love the quarterback, my number one option, if I don't love the quarterback, is to trade down from 3, stay in the top 8 or 9, draft the best tackle available, and get those extra picks. That's what I would want them to do. I understand the Marvin Harrison love. Dude's tremendous. But wide receiver to me is the last piece that I'm going to address. If I had things my way, quarterback, a young tackle, and then I get to wide receiver. That's how I feel. But Drago, I can't disagree with the Marvin Harrison take about, how talented he is. He's fantastic. All right, let's go through some names here for a couple minutes that are still on the market. So Calvin Ridley, all in on him. If he walks, he walks. Hollywood Brown, again, he's better than anyone that you have on this roster, so I'm interested. But I'm not going to go, buck wild. I'm not walking in with the money gun for Hollywood Brown. He does have the speed element. He's still young, talented guy. I'd be interested, but at a certain level. Tyler Boyd, I'd be interested, but I wouldn't go bananas on the price. Curtis Samuel, I would be interested, but I would be interested in him less than Hollywood Brown if we're tiering this, if we're putting these guys on boards, okay? So I'd have Samuel below Hollywood Brown. Josh Reynolds is somebody I would absolutely be interested in. He's a great fit within the system. He had experience with the Rams and the Lions, so I would be interested in Josh Reynolds. Odell Beckham Jr., this one's a little bit polarizing. I'd be interested in OBJ if it was cheap. If it was cheap and an incentive-laden deal. If you could replace Tyquan Thornton with OBJ, I would do it. But if you've got to pay real money, I wouldn't. And what I mean by real money is, 7, 8 million, 9 million guaranteed, I'm out on that. But if you can get OBJ on kind of a flyer, then I would bring him in. He's better than Tyquan Thornton even at this age. He's better than Jalen Reagor. So I would entertain that. He wouldn't be your wide receiver 1, but I would entertain bringing him into the room. Tackle, we talked about it. Smith, Williams, Becton, I'm in. Safety names still out there. Justin Simmons is still out there. Cam Curl's still out there. Julian Blackmon, Jordan Fuller. Those are some guys. Jordan Whitehead maybe, but those are the safeties I'd be looking at. Cornerback market is still pretty damn good. Pretty good. Kendall Fuller is still on the market. I would absolutely be interested in Fuller. I've talked about Stephon Gilmore, had him on my off-season preview plan for the defense. I would be interested in a 1-year deal with Stephon Gilmore to bring him back and work with Christian Gonzalez. And I would also be interested in Steven Nelson. I don't think he's bad. So those are the cornerbacks that I'd be looking at. But it's just to remind all of you that there is still talent out there. Lots of talent. Lots and lots of talent. So Let's see what they do. It's March 13th. And we also can't forget the draft. We can't forget you can acquire players via trade. There's so much offseason left. We're not talking mandatory minicamp until 3 months from now. So I know we get wrapped up in the day-to-day, and that's fine. And we can grade things day-to-day, but remember the big picture. This is a team-building process. You build your team through free agency, you build your team through trades, and you build your team through the draft. We're 2 days past the beginning of free agency, phase 1 of that process. Take a deep breath. Let's see what happens. Can't wait for the Calvin Ridley tweet at 4:01 that he's staying in Jacksonville. But let's see the pivot. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to subscribe. Trying to get to 2,500 subscribers by April 1st. If you enjoy this alternative, if you enjoy the Nick Cattle Show, then hop on board with us. The water's warm. The beer is cold. Again, it is easy to subscribe. Also, press that thumbs up button for us on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. Rate and review us. Those 5-star reviews are tremendous on Spotify, Apple Pods, all that stuff. So rate and review. And check out the Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/Nick Cattle, CATTLES, exclusive content. Check out what we're doing there. And if you're interested, it's $5 a month, $1.25 a week. All right, something big breaks. We'll be back on it. If not, then until tomorrow, this has been the Nick Cattle Show.